Most people believe credit cards only change how people pay, but psychologically, they often change how people spend too. That difference matters, because behavior changes once emotional experience changes, and spending is deeply emotional. This is Streetwise Wealth Academy. I'm Winston, your synthetic financial educator. This content is educational commentary only and is not personalized financial advice, so always research financial decisions carefully. Now, this is important to say clearly from the beginning. This is not an anti-credit card discussion. Credit cards are tools. Many people use them responsibly. Some use them for convenience. Some use them for rewards. Some use them to organize spending. The goal here is not fear. The goal is understanding behavior, because systems become easier to navigate once people understand how those systems influence psychology underneath the surface. Years ago, most spending involved physical cash. Money visibly left your hand. You physically watched it disappear. That created emotional friction. And friction matters more than many people realize, because friction slows behavior down. It creates pause moments, moments where spending feels emotionally real. You physically experienced loss in the moment the purchase happened. That emotional visibility naturally created resistance, not perfect resistance, but enough to slow many decisions down slightly. Credit cards change that experience dramatically. Now spending often feels almost invisible in the moment. Tap, swipe, done. No visible cash leaving your hand. No immediate emotional loss sensation. And because the emotional experience becomes smoother, behavior often changes quietly underneath awareness. Not dramatically at first, gradually. Now, this does not happen because people are irresponsible. Human beings naturally behave differently inside low-friction environments. That's normal psychology. But reduced friction often increases repeated behavior automatically over time. Because the easier something feels emotionally, the easier repetition becomes psychologically. Now, another important layer here involves timing. Cash spending usually creates immediate emotional visibility. Credit spending delays that visibility. The purchase happens now, the payment happens later, and delayed consequences often feel psychologically distant in the present moment. That matters enormously, because immediate emotions strongly influence human behavior. A future bill rarely feels as emotionally intense as immediate visible loss. That psychological distance changes decision-making quietly underneath awareness. Modern financial systems understand this extremely well. That's one reason so many systems increasingly emphasize speed, convenience, seamless transactions. The smoother spending feels, the easier participation becomes. Again, this is not about conspiracy. It's about incentives. Systems naturally evolve toward patterns that increase engagement and usage, and reduced friction increases both extremely effectively. Now, another important factor here is abstraction. Cash feels concrete. People physically see money decreasing. But digital spending often feels abstract psychologically. Numbers move on screens. Balances update automatically. Payments happen later. And abstraction often reduces emotional visibility over time. Now, emotional visibility matters because people usually behave differently once consequences feel immediate and tangible. That's normal behavior too. Another important layer appears once spending becomes emotionally invisible enough to normalize automatically. People stop consciously evaluating purchases deeply, not because they stop caring, because repeated low-friction behavior eventually becomes routine psychologically, and routine behavior often receives less emotional attention. Now, another important layer appears once reward systems enter the picture. Cashback, points, travel rewards, perks. Again, none of these are automatically bad, but reward systems do something psychologically important. They associate spending with positive reinforcement, and human beings naturally repeat behaviors that feel rewarded. That's basic behavioral psychology. Now, this becomes especially powerful once rewards combine with convenience. Because now spending feels easy, fast, rewarded. That combination strongly encourages repeated engagement behaviorally. Now, another important factor here is emotional exhaustion. Because modern life creates enormous cognitive load, people get tired, overwhelmed, mentally overloaded, emotionally drained. and mentally exhausted people naturally prefer lower-effort decisions. That's normal. A long, stressful day increases convenience spending. Mental overload increases impulse behavior. Emotional fatigue increases low-friction decision-making. Not because people are weak, because overloaded minds naturally conserve energy. Now, modern financial systems are heavily optimized around reduced-effort environments. One-click ordering, instant approvals, stored payment methods, automatic renewals. Everything becomes designed around reducing pause moments. And pause moments matter psychologically, because pauses create awareness. Without pauses, behavior often becomes increasingly automatic. Now, another important factor here is normalization, because credit card usage feels completely normal in modern life. Most people grow up surrounded by financing systems, monthly payments, recurring subscriptions, deferred payment systems, credit-based convenience. And once a behavior becomes culturally normal, people stop emotionally examining the system itself. The card becomes automatic. The spending becomes automatic. The behavior becomes automatic. And normalized systems are often the hardest systems to evaluate clearly while they're operating. Now, another important layer here involves lifestyle expansion, because reduced friction often increases willingness to normalize slightly higher spending levels over time. A nicer purchase feels manageable. A convenience upgrade feels manageable. A recurring subscription feels manageable. A slightly more expensive lifestyle feels manageable. And individually, many of those decisions genuinely are manageable. That's the important part. Financial pressure rarely develops through one dramatic spending event. It usually develops through repeated normalization operating quietly across years. Small conveniences, small repeated swipes, small upgraded expectations accumulating gradually underneath awareness. Now, another important reason spending behavior becomes emotionally complicated is because modern culture strongly connects spending with identity and comfort. Advertising, social media, entertainment systems, all continuously reinforcing upgraded lifestyles and convenience-focused living. And repeated exposure quietly changes emotional expectations over time. Not because people consciously compare themselves constantly, because human beings naturally adapt to surrounding environments psychologically. Now, eventually, certain spending levels stop feeling luxurious. They simply begin feeling emotionally standard. And once expectations normalize upward, maintaining those expectations often begins influencing long-term financial structure underneath the surface. Now, another important factor here is speed. Modern financial environments move extremely quickly. People often make purchases while distracted, busy, mentally overloaded, emotionally exhausted, and fast-moving environments naturally reduce reflection. That matters because reflection creates pause moments, and pause moments create awareness. Without pauses, behavior often becomes increasingly automatic. Now, another important factor here is emotional relief. Because many purchases are not driven purely by logic. Some spending is emotional regulation, comfort spending, convenience spending, stress spending, reward spending, and modern systems increasingly understand how emotional states influence spending behavior. That's one reason convenience-focused systems become so psychologically powerful during stressful periods. Not because people are irrational, because emotional exhaustion changes decision-making behavior automatically. Now, this does not mean credit cards automatically create financial problems. Far from it. The deeper issue is understanding how systems influence behavior quietly underneath awareness, because awareness changes observation. Once people understand how friction affects spending, how delayed consequences affect emotional processing, how reward systems affect repetition, financial behavior often becomes easier to evaluate more clearly, not emotionally, more structurally. Now, another important reason this discussion matters is because many people blame themselves for behaviors they were never taught to understand psychologically. They assume spending problems come purely from lack of discipline. But human behavior is heavily influenced by environment. Convenience influences behavior. Rewards influence behavior. Normalization influences behavior. Friction influences behavior. And systems optimized around reduced resistance naturally influence repeated decision-making over time. Now, none of this means people are powerless. Far from it. Understanding systems creates perspective, and perspective changes awareness. Instead of viewing spending only as isolated personal decisions, you begin noticing the environments influencing those decisions continuously underneath the surface. Convenience systems, attention systems, reward systems, normalization systems, and once those systems become visible, financial behavior often starts making more sense structurally, not instantly, not perfectly, but progressively. Because invisible systems are usually the hardest systems to evaluate clearly, not because they are unbeatable, but because people stop recognizing how often those systems quietly shape behavior underneath everyday life. Now, financial life is rarely shaped by one dramatic purchase. It is usually shaped through repeated behavioral systems operating quietly across time. Small conveniences, small repeated swipes, small normalized upgrades accumulating gradually underneath awareness. And once those patterns become visible, credit cards themselves often start looking different. Not evil, not magical, simply powerful financial tools operating inside powerful behavioral environments. And understanding that difference changes how modern spending behavior itself gets interpreted moving forward. Less emotionally, more structurally, more clearly. Because systems become easier to navigate once people stop viewing behavior purely through guilt and begin understanding the environments quietly shaping that behavior underneath the surface. That concludes today's lesson. Peace. If this lesson helped you see money a little differently, then stay with the series. Because financial understanding is not built from one idea. It is built layer by layer. One system, one pattern, one hidden behavior at a time. This first month is focused on the financial lessons many adults were never properly taught growing up. How money moves, how debt works, how stress builds, how behavior gets shaped, and how modern financial systems quietly influence everyday life. So watch the next lesson when you're ready, and keep building the foundation. This is Streetwise Wealth Academy. I'm Winston. Peace.